Hello, hello. Hi, Aurelien.
Hello, hi.
Hi, how are you?
Great, thank you. Thank you, fantastic.
Such a pleasure to have you here. I've been talking about the brand a lot, and I'm really glad that I was the first one to talk about the brand. And I'm so happy that you finally took some time to talk about one of my best discoveries of the year. So, thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Really
Thank,
appreciate it.
thank you. Well, indeed, I don't usually talk much about it, and it's a kind of premiere, and it's a pleasure to be to have the time and the space
Yeah.
to share my work with you guys.
Thank you very much. You know, I'm into marketing, and from marketing perspective, and also from a fragrance enthusiast perspective, it's always beautiful when the creator or someone from the team talks about the fragrances. So I do really appreciate when I look at the IGTV where you take us through the whole process of creating the fragrance and what your thought process is. But I thought it would be great if you would have a live together and talk about the fragrances and probably about your background, because that's something which really interests me and fascinates me, because you have such great experiences and beautiful perfumes under your portfolio. But I'm just very curious about your background and how did you come about creating this beautiful brand? I mean, you have done so much work outside it, but just please talk about your background. I'm really fascinated by it.
You know, I was very lucky because I'm originally from Grasse. I'm the seventh generation perfumer in my family.
Okay.
So we've been working in that industry for generations.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was young, I grew up not only with perfumers, but with artists. My
Mm-hmm.
mother is a sculptress. My grandparents were growing flowers, roses,
Okay.
jasmine, verbena, in the south of France.
Mm-hmm.
And my life was really, about, the surrounding around my childhood was with people who were passionate about their work, and they were really creating perfume for a reason, with,
Mm-hmm.
a will to create beautiful perfume with beautiful ingredients. And it was a very easygoing kind of thing at the same
Okay.
time, It was a bit like in some families, some people talk about football, some others talk about cricket, some others talk about, whatever, art,
Correct.
literature. In my family, everyone was talking about perfumes.
Okay.
So as I grew up, I never really had the will to be a perfumer, but I would say, very exposed, and I was
Mm-hmm.
surrounded by people that I was really looking up to in a
Mm-hmm.
way that I could see that it was really something deep, and they really had an ethic around it.
Correct.
So I was lucky enough to integrate a perfumery school when I was 20 years old,
Mm-hmm.
and that changed my life. I grew up playing a lot of sports, a lot of field hockey, actually.
Okay. Okay.
And I've always loved to play. When I was a little kid, I didn't like to study, like many
Mm-hmm.
kids. I love to play. And creating perfume is about playing.
Right.
And I think what I loved about creating fragrances, and what attracted me, was to create with other people and for other people.
Okay.
It's a conversation I've often had with with friends of mine who are artists, and they create alone quite often.
Okay.
When you're a perfumer, the work is opposite. You create for other people and with other people.
Correct.
And this act of these teams, this kind of act of creation with people, is really what I find beautiful about my work. The fact that you don't just create for yourself, but for other people.
Yeah. Okay.
And when I was 20 years old, so I started to learn perfumery, where I did the Givaudan Perfumery School,
Mm-hmm.
where during 3 years you learn ingredients by heart every day. You are tested. You learn ingredients after ingredients, and after 3 years, you roughly know about 6,000 to 8,000 raw materials. An average person would know maybe 1,000 smells.
Maybe.
A perfumer will know maybe 10,000.
Mm-hmm.
And so you learn. It's a bit like Les Beaux-Arts, or it's a bit like an artistic school. And so it's not very creative. In fact, it's extremely
learning.
Extremely learning. It's a bit like learning a language. When you learn a new language, you learn words, you forget them, you learn them again, and then you use them, and they become part of you. And only later, after 3 years, I started to create perfume. I was very lucky because my first fragrances, when I was only 23, or 24 maybe, where for Nina Ricci, there was a fragrance called Love in Paris, and there was a fragrance called, there was a fragrance for Guerlain as well. So from that day on, when I won those projects and created those fragrances, my career started.
Okay. So Eros and these hits, they came probably later, right? Like I was looking at, I wasn't aware of, because, you know, there's so many fragrances, and then I went to your Fragrantica page and I was like, okay, so he did Zadig and Voltaire. This is him. Really, it's one of my favorite incense sandalwood fragrance. And I was like, Eros. And then, you know, so there are really big names out there. So these were probably not your initial ones, right? Like, or were they
no,
in the beginning?
So as I was saying, you know, I started winning those first fragrances. And at the early stage of my career, I really had the conviction that when you create a fragrance, it can be done, you know, many people work in team with different perfumers.
Okay.
My convictions at the time was to create a fragrance alone, and that it was like an art where you don't necessarily have to create a fragrance with 2 or 3 perfumers. You can do it on your own. And I think, you know, looking back at that, it's probably because I was a young perfumer and I needed really to prove myself that I was capable. And I was also very lucky to work with people who were trusting my work. And so, you know, once I worked for a couple of years in New York, in America, and came back to Paris. And when I came back to Paris, I was, you know, I was lucky enough to make fragrances for Gucci. I made Gucci for Men, Gucci Guilty, and one project called The Other, you know, then Eros. And I started, you know, long-term relationships and collaboration with designers such as Narciso Rodriguez.
As all the fragrances that you did, by the way.
Miyake, Gucci. And, you know, again, you know, I say that because what I loved about my work is not just about creating the perfume, but it's the continuous relationship you build with people when you create fragrances, because it's not just about mixing product. It's about understanding what someone will like and what this person will dislike, and to try to create uniqueness with beauty. And you know, it's not much more complicated than that. It's about...
No, I can tell whatever you are saying by smelling your work from Matiere Premiere, but we will get into that later. Yasmin, a friend of mine, asks, what do you mean by winning that Narciso Rodriguez perfume? Is it like a tender that you have to apply for and they choose a fragrance? Or actually, great question. I didn't know.
Yes. No, in fact, you know, when you start a project and when you start a collaboration, a designer or a couturier will not necessarily know you or will not necessarily know your work, especially when you're a young perfumer. And so what happened is you have several perfumers that are being briefed, and those perfumers will individually show their work, and ultimately one fragrance will be chosen after maybe...
And you would not know who other fragrances perfumers are?
No.
Okay.
You don't necessarily know. And a lot of people think it's about competition. It's not about competition. It's about writing a story, writing a fragrance, composing, and being as close as possible to the desire of the person you work for. You know, when I work, I'm a perfumer for Takasago. I started my career at Givaudan, which is another beautiful fragrance house, and I worked at Firmenich. And you work in an environment where you need to understand, you know, the world of a creator, whether it's a brand, whether it's a celebrity, or if it's a couturier. But you need, you know, a perfumer is a translator. So of course, we work with our own test. We work with our palette, the ingredients we choose. But we work for someone. And we work for people so that they can feel this balance of uniqueness and beauty.
But beautifully answered, Aurelia. But my question is, what is the difference when you create for Versace and Narciso Rodriguez, and then you create something for your own? Because you said you like working with others and probably bounce the ideas back and forth. You know, I'm also the first person who likes to probably work in a team than alone. But what is then a difference when you do a brand of your own and then you work for a mass fragrance house?
So there's two things. First, I'm very lucky because I work only for people that I want to work for.
Correct.
So I choose a project I work for, and when I'm lucky, people choose my work. It doesn't always happen, you know. And so the main difference is when I create for someone, my work will really be about respecting his universe, his world. Meaning that, you know, if a couturier works in details, with many little cuts, with many different details on his work, then the perfume has to represent that. So probably the fragrance will be quite complex with many little ingredients. If I work for a different person, a different couturier, who will be more straightforward, more sharp, more vertical, the fragrance has to smell that.
Correct.
So, you know, it's a bit like if you write a story for someone, you have the theme of the story, and then you have the way to write it and to express it. So let's say I create a patchouli for Narciso Rodriguez. It will smell very different from the patchouli that I will create for Versace or for Matiere Premiere or for Gucci.
Yeah, but how does then the briefing look like? So let's take a fragrance, I don't know, incense suave, yeah, and then a fragrance of Miyake, right? So did the briefing, I mean, here you probably didn't have a briefing. This is your own creation. So how does the briefing look like? Does it have like a story, or is it more like okay, we want an incense fragrance?
How will I understand? And it's a great point. And you give great example. The beauty of my work, it's never the same.
Correct.
When you work for Miyake, Mr. Miyake once gave me a brief. It was a plane ticket. He sent me a plane ticket at my office, and he said, Aurelien, can you please take this plane and go to this island in Japan? This island is called Zamami. It's dear to my heart. And Mr. Miyake told me, it's dear to my heart, and I would like you to create a fragrance by getting the inspiration from this place.
Correct.
That was an amazing brief. So I took the plane, spent 5 days over there, experienced the ingredients, the nature, the elements, and came back to Paris and created fragrances for that. Then you have other people with whom I will work differently. With Narciso, for example, it will be more, I work with him, with a team of people at Shiseido, and it will be more about an abstract feeling. You know, Narciso has a very specific taste for musk. So he will, you know, sometimes the truth lies in between words. So sometimes it's suggested, and it's not just a PowerPoint presentation.
Correct.
And finally, when I work for Matiere Premiere, my goal was to show the beauty of the world of perfumer. And what I find beautiful in my work is the access to raw materials. Right. So the idea each time is to build a fragrance with a fake simplicity, where you have the feeling that you can smell the texture of the overdosed ingredient. So one overdose where you just amplify certain facets with my own style.
Correct.
So of course people tell me, but Aurelien, your style is also in the fragrances you create for Narciso, for Versace. Yes, but it's very much after the test of the designer.
Yeah.
When I create for Matiere Première, it's very much about my test and the one of my partners of Matiere Première.
Understood. It's beautiful, because I was, you know, me as a new person in fragrance industry or fragrances, I always wonder, how do you create something new? Like, for example, you go out and say, I want to create incense suave, and I want to have, I want to do a coffee fragrance, right? And coffee is a material that you smell every day. You know, vanilla is another material you smell or you eat in ice creams. So how do you go there and create something that seems familiar but also very addictive and, you know, and smells really high quality?
One main thing that drives my creation is the goal is not just to be creative when you create a fragrance. The goal is to create something that people will appreciate and they will find it unique. You know, when I look at painting, I will love a paint or a painting that when I look at it, I understand what I see and I can appreciate it. But though each time I look at it, I see something different, something I don't quite understand. And it's always this balance of understanding and not understanding everything that keeps the mystery. My idea behind Matière Première was for people to understand my work and to share the act of creation. Instead of talking about top, mid, and dry, we talk about one main idea. The main idea, for example, for Encens Suave was to create an addictive incense. That was my creative idea before even starting to compose on my formula sheets. Crazy. And I said, then at Matière Première, we always choose one main ingredient that we will overdose. So I will overdose as the perfumer of Matière Première, one ingredient that I will select. In this case, Neroli. This is Neroli. But for Encens Suave, I overdosed a resin of incense coming from Somalia, because the work of sourcing is key in the work of perfumer. Matière Première, the name of the company, means the raw material. And so then once I choose this main ingredient, the creative approach will be to facet certain elements of the ingredients that I love, that are very dear to my heart. And opposed to many fragrances that are very complex, at Matière Première, we keep this same, this fake simplicity. And the incense that I have on my office, when it's a raw material, the texture of it, I want to preserve it. I don't want to blend it with other overdose. I will just amplify a gourmand facet. And the gourmand facet for Encens Suave is a coffee note. And it's also a vanilla bean because it's soft. It's probably the opposite of the dryness of the incense. And the idea was to really counterbalance the dryness of incense, to preserve the verticality, to preserve the spirituality of an incense, but to add more comfort, more tenderness.
It's a warm and enveloping fragrance. You know, there again, I think Somalian incense is used in a lot of fragrances, or sacre. I can name 5 things on top of my head where they say Somalian incense, but this twist of vanilla and incense and also and very coffee. Strong and coffee is beautiful. One question, Aurelien. I mean, you know, you've done so much work. Are there any fragrances or perfumers that you look up to, like, or any perfumer whose style you think is pretty cool and or that inspires you in a way?
I will be very honest, and I really hope it won't sound pretentious at all. I have a lot of admiration for certain perfumers that I grew up with, whether it's my father, whether it's Pierre Bourdon, my godfather, who was a creator of Cool Water. My father, for example, was creator of Eden, of Lulu.
Okay. Wow.
And I've worked and collaborated with some great perfumers in my life, with Alberto Morillas, Christine Nagel, and I really enjoyed working with them. But I wouldn't say there's the one that I really feel, okay, is my mentor.
Okay.
So I actually think, excuse me, I actually think that there are many where I really look up at their work. And you know, when I wear a fragrance myself, I don't wear my own fragrances.
Do you not?
Rarely.
Because funny.
Only when I work. So when I develop them, I wear my fragrances. But I love to wear fragrances of other perfumers where I don't know the formula. Okay. And I think it's very pleasant to be an outsider of it sometimes.
Okay, but could you name some?
Yes, of course. I loved Dior, for example. It's a fragrance that I like very much. I love to smell, Fahrenheit is a fragrance that I loved. I also love some women's fragrance, L'Heure Bleue. When I was a little kid, it's actually L'Heure Bleue that gave me the will to become a perfumer.
Wow.
When I was 14 years old, it's a very personal memory, but it's a fun one. So I grew up until 14 years old, with my father creating perfume, coming back from the office, smelling different modification on the skin of my mother and making comparison. So I was familiar with this, but I was looking at that as my father's job. And one evening we went to a restaurant in Paris. It was a winter day, and we were having dinner with 3 friends of my parents. And I was the only kid at the table. And after the dinner, I mean, I was pretty, I wouldn't say I was bored, but a little bit, but, you know, I was not paying much attention to the dinner. And when the dinner was finished, you know, as a well brought up little kid, I helped one of the lady to put her coat on her shoulder. And at that moment, I really felt this woman was extremely seductive and desirable because of the smell of her fur coat, of this perfume and her skin. And I realized that day when I was 14, that there was something magic in fragrance. What else in the world can make someone desirable? Nothing else. You know, and really, you know, you will see how I still feel when I talk about it. I don't think there's anything more magical than fragrances. And you know, coming back to your question before, are there perfumers that I have a lot of admiration for? Yes and no. There's plenty of perfumers that I think are great, but what I found amazing are the perfumes. When you wear a perfume that smells different from anything else, and that gives you this magic thing that makes you desirable, I think it's amazing.
Absolutely. Lovely story, actually. Unfortunately, I did not have any experience with fragrances. I wish I had it. But is there any fragrance that you wish that you did, like Dior Homme, for example?
Yes, of course. But you know, I have a lot of respect for my compass, for my colleagues who are perfumer, and I think the diversity is important. I mean, you know, certainly the fact that we create with different style, different approach, different desire, it's wonderful, you know, to have a diversity. I think the worst enemy of creation is when everything is the same, when you have you know, I think, yeah. So I look up at other people's work as well. Yeah.
Absolutely, because this is completely different from what I hear, because I do interview a few other perfumers, and they always say, you know, we're always wearing our work because, you know, you're so much in the process, and you want to see how well it smells, how the dry down smells. But it's very refreshing to hear that you enjoy wearing other fragrances too. So that's lovely.
You know, it's really about fun. It's, you know, of course, most of perfumers are passionate about what they do, but it has to be fun, and a fragrance has to bring some extra thing in your life. And to me, that's the definition of a good fragrance.
Right.
What extra does it bring you?
Yeah, but now in these difficult times, or, you know, do you have? Does it happen that you say, you know what, I don't want to do, or I don't feel like doing it? So what do you do when you are like, you know, like writers have writer's block, where you're like, you know what, today I can't do it. I have to switch off. Probably I don't listen to music, watch sports. You know, does it happen with you? Probably, right?
There are some days where you have good ideas.
Yeah.
There are some days where I will compose maybe 30 fragrances, 30 different modifications, and no one will be good. None of them will be good. And some days where you have just a clear idea of what to do.
Absolutely.
It's, you know, every day is different, but I rarely feel sluggish, or I rarely feel tired of trying, you know, because again, to me, creating fragrance is about having fun, and it's really what I feel, you know, whether I create for Matière Première, or that I create for other brands, or that I create for a couturier. All that matters to me is the experience of creation and the moment I share with the people I work for.
Beautiful. That's lovely. On this note, I would really like to talk about Matière Première, and one of my favorite roses ever. I think this is one fragrance. Is because of this I wanted to talk to you. So anyone who's watching who likes rose, or who hasn't smelled rose yet in a fragrance, I think this is one fragrance that I have no second thoughts, you know, recommending you. So please talk about Radical Rose. First of all, I love the names of the fragrance, but also here, I think from the naming perspective, beautiful naming and a beautiful fragrance. So talk about the overdose.
Yeah, so Matière Première was launched a year ago. We are just launching Radical Rose. So it's a new fragrance from Matière Première, and it's the result of a long project. In 2015, I opened my own organic farm in the south of France, where I grow my own roses, which is unique. You know, I'm the only perfumer in the world who grow its own raw materials. So I grow organic rose centifolia, which is a rose absolute. And I thought there was beautiful fragrances already created around rose. And it was about a bit the same kind of subject as incense, you know. How do you create something different, but somehow that can be really appreciative? And our first harvest arrived in 2019, in May, of this Rose Centifolia. So during 1 year, I used those Absolute to create Radical Rose. And the idea behind Radical Rose was to create the fragrance with the highest dosage ever of Rose Centifolia Absolute. Mm-hmm. So Radical Rose has the highest dosage of Rose Centifolia Absolute. If you show the bottle, actually, can you show it again? At Matière Première, we don't bring any colorant in a bottle. Mm-hmm. This is the color of the ingredients.
Because I was curious about this, you know, because this is much darker than this one.
So this is only given by the color of the ingredients. All our fragrances are, and we put the money in the bottle, not on the bottle and around the bottle, but in the bottle. And so Radical Rose has the highest dosage of Rose Centifolia Absolute. It's an organic rose. And my idea was to create a cool rose. On the rose itself, the Absolute is pretty intense, pretty dark. So I wanted to amplify the brightness. So I added touches of pink pepper and from Jamaica and some saffron. Then on the note, what I've done, I've added touches of dark notes because I wanted this rose to be cool, to be dark, to be intense. When you do the harvest in Grasse of Rose Centifolia, you do it every morning for 30 days in May.
Okay.
And the pickers come and they get every single flowers. We have over 10,000 plants of roses over there. And after maybe an hour of picking, you get a kind of sap on your fingers. So I wanted to reproduce this feeling in Radical Rose. I've used some Cistus labdanum from Andalusia, which gives this resinous quality, and a nice dose of patchouli from Indonesia to give darkness. And Radical Rose is a good example of the work that we do at Matière Première. Fragrances is either for men and women, and when the material itself is pretty feminine, then I will kind of adapt ingredients that bring a masculine balance to it.
Correct.
So that it can be worn by men as well.
Yeah. No, there is a contrast. There is really a contrast. I think Ivana also mentioned in the comments that there is a contrast of light and dark. There is a contrast of fresh and woody. You know, there are jammy aspects to it, you know, because of the patchouli. And it's really a beautiful fragrance, because rose, I smell rose every second, third day in some of the other fragrance, right? And it's done so much that you are like, okay, how is this rose different? Because if you put a rose in the word of a fragrance, you're like, okay, let's see how that rose is. But it really blew my mind, and I think you mentioned.
Thank you, Raoul. But you know, really, why Matière Première is unique? It's because we really, sincerely, 50% of the beauty of the fragrance is given by the beauty of what nature gives us. Nature gives us beautiful raw materials. Then the other part of the fragrance is about how I will compose the fragrance, how I will respect the beauty of that one ingredient that I overdosed, and how do I make it visible for someone who's not an expert.
Correct.
And to me, that's really the task of Matière Première.
Absolutely. And you know, sorry.
And you know, people tell us that the fact that they can understand what they wear, it's something that they appreciate, that they can really feel the rose, that they can really feel the orange flower in Neroli Orangé, and that they can also understand how I created the fragrance. It's really something that also allow you to have long-lasting fragrances without having to put too much complexity, because the high dosage of the ingredient allow you to be powerful.
Correct.
It also has a very sustainable approach, because when you put a high dosage of an ingredient, of course, I try to select ethic and organic ingredients. But you know, when on top of that you use a high dosage, and also you use a high concentration, it means you put a lot of this ingredient in the bottle. Correct. So the farmer who is producing it is sure that you are not just going to buy a small production, but a large one, so he can make plans for the future, and therefore it's sustainable. So that also, to me, was dear to my heart as a perfumer, to help this part of the industry of people who grow raw materials.
Lovely. Because Perfumed Angle just said the same thing, or you answered his or her question, that Aurelien, of those I've tried from your creations, projection and performance always seems to be so well done. What is it that you different than other perfumers? And then you answered, it's basically, I guess, this overdosage of the materials. But I guess there must be other things also that help with longevity and projection.
Yes, there are, I would say, two main other reasons. As I said, our fragrances, they are not made with top, mid, and dry.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, when you have I would say, a more complex fragrance, you will smell fresh note on the top, less fresh note on the heart, and the dry down. For us at Matière Première, what you smell on the top is more or less what you will smell all time along. And this because we don't put a lot of, I don't put a lot of attention to create fragrances with top, mid, and dry. I create with a different way of doing. I create with that main ingredient where I amplify certain facets. And also, I think the reason why they are powerful and they have a style is because I create them with certain ingredients that I select that you find in every fragrances of Matière Première, whether it's and that gives a kind of common diffusion.
Right.
But to me, the beauty and the challenge behind Matière Première was to use a high dosage of a raw material without smelling old-fashioned. Because, you know, I remember when I grew up in the 80s, wonderful fragrances that were very powerful, very intense. But sometimes today, when you smell them, you feel, okay, maybe they're a bit dense. I wanted our fragrances to be overdosed in a raw material, but to have brightness through it, that you don't feel over fragranced. You know, it's a bit like too much makeup is not cool. Well, too much fragrance is not cool. So you need to be diffusive, but not overpowering.
Absolutely.
And to me, it's key.
Yeah, because I've now realized when you said that there is maybe an element that is similar through all of them, and then I think you smell it like this half an hour or 20 minutes after you put. I don't know if it's something woody, is it something musky, but there is this underlying something that you can say that this is the same line, right? Because I remember when I first got the Discovery kit, it was only these paper things, and it never happens that I open my letterbox and then it smells good, right? Because there is no reason that my post box will smell good. It probably is opposite to that, and then I'm like, what's going on? Someone poured a fragrance in there, because it came in a paper envelope. It never comes in a paper envelope. And then I later realized that there was this underlying muskiness. I don't know. To me, it's woody, something with woodiness in there that smells across the fragrance that gives it a lot of character. Let's call it like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that you cannot.
I won't tell all my secrets. What do you think?
Okay, but I can completely agree with you. And now let's talk about Persian musk, another beautiful woody musk, if I may, slight green, very very beautiful Persian musk. Let's talk about that.
Indeed, for many years I created most of the fragrances for Narciso Rodriguez with him, and he was obsessed with musk.
Okay.
And when I started Matière Première, I wanted to create a different musk, a unique musk. So I said, okay, I don't think in my mind I know any woody musk. And probably there are, you know, there are so many fragrances, but none of them really strike my mind. So I said, okay, my first creative idea will be to create a woody musk. Now, what ingredient will represent a woody musk? So in my mind, I searched and I said, okay, there's one ingredient, ambrette seed absolute. And ambrette is a passionating ingredient because it's a musky animalic note, not made with an animal, made with a vegetal, with a seed. And by essence, by what it is, the seed of ambrette is woody, just like a seed of carrot, a seed of cumin. So I said, okay, this will be my starting point, my center overdose of Parisian musk. So I just combined the creative approach. I amplified I would say, the woodiness with some cedar oil from Virginia. I amplified the muskiness with a vegan musk, Ambretolide Supreme. And finally, just in the back, very simply, a touch of Ambrox, which link the musk to the wood. And in it, in order to be a bit more vegetal, a touch of fig leaf.
Right, because this is the greenness. I smell more stronger than any musk. And I was curious if it's, I was looking at the note breakdown. I was like, I don't see anything green leaf-like. And now fig makes sense because it's not on there. But to me, it's more green than musky, at least on the paper.
But you see, even at Matière Première, we want people to be almost behind the perfumer desk where I work from. And our visuals are taken from my office on my desk. And in the center of the visual appears the raw material, which is a scented one. And for Parisian musk, it's a fig note. It's a fig leaf.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, it's green, definitely, and cream. Beautiful. Neroli. So a lot of questions about where you source Neroli from. I mean, again, Neroli is another fragrance note that I think is really done. I've smelled, it smells the same, but here there is, again, some kind of a magic. I guess only you can explain what's going on here. Beautiful.
Well, I feel very touched by what you say.
Yeah.
It's very kind. Well, Neroli, it's a beautiful ingredient for perfumer because we have many different ingredients that are actually coming from the Neroli tree. The Neroli tree is actually the orange tree. From this tree, we get fruits, the bitter orange oil. We get flowers, where we do oil, Neroli oil, and we get an absolute, the Neroli absolute, which is the orange flower absolute.
The orange blossom.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. And we also get some notes where we do distillation of leaves and the branches. Those are called petit grain. So it's a beautiful ingredient, a beautiful plant for perfumer. I wanted to create a fragrance around purity, something extremely pure that smells white. The ingredient I chose, the overdose I chose, was Orange Blossom Absolute from Tunisia. Neroli Oranger is probably one of the highest fragrance dosed in Orange Blossom Absolute. So at the center of the fragrance, we have this overdose. And just for any other fragrances at Matière Première, I've amplified certain ingredients or I've added to the fragrance ingredients that were expressing the idea of white. So you have a touch of Neroli oil, which is actually from Liban. When I learned perfumery, my father was always telling me that things that grow in the same place go well together.
Okay, yeah, right.
And for the Neroli Oranger, I tried the Neroli oil from Tunisia, but it wasn't as good as the Neroli oil from Liban. So it's a Neroli oil from Lebanon combined with the Orange Blossom Absolute from Tunisia. I wanted to amplify also the petaliness of the fragrance. So I've used a touch in the fragrance, a touch of bergamot, because it's the most floral ingredient of the citrus note. In the back, just a couple of musk, floral musk, that gives fluidity and brightness to the fragrance. Yeah. And finally, a touch of ylang to amplify the white petally effect of the fragrance. So very simple, but
that's the beauty of it. That's really the beauty of it, because my wife hates Neroli. Like, she can't stand it, and I hate it because I can't wear Neroli. And this fragrance really makes me happy. It feels like when it's hot outside, you can take a bucket of it, and you can bath. You can bathe with it. It's a happy fragrance. It's it just makes me smile when I smell it, because it's so bright and uplifting, and also very fruity and very nice.
Actually, it's funny what you say, because orange flower bloom in March, April. And it's when the bright days come back again. It's and there's something bright and beautiful. And I've rarely smelled a fragrance where you can really feel the beauty that you have when you smell and when you put your nose right above a flower of orange flower. And so the idea really behind Neroli Oranger was to really get this smell, because when you're a perfumer and you have a beautiful orange flower absolute that costs an absolute fortune, you want to preserve this beauty. And the idea of Neroli Oranger was to preserve the beauty of the starting raw material that we have in this formula.
Lovely, lovely. I'm butchering the name probably. Bois d'Ebene.
Bois d'ébène.
Bois d'Ebene. Okay, let's try
It's
that.
like a dark wood.
It's a dark wood. Okay, that means dark wood. Let's see.
So the story behind Bois d'ébène was to create a dark, ambery wood, very intense. It's almost like a patchwork of different woods. The main ingredient is absolutely magic. It's a Bois de Gaillac coming from Paraguay. And the idea behind the work was to darken this Gaillac wood oil from Paraguay. I've combined it with some patchouli oil from Indonesia because patchouli, you know, it's a leaf that moistures on the ground and smells very dark, humid. So it's beautiful. It gives a lot of deepness. I've combined it with some cypriol, which is almost like a woody ambery note that I found beautiful because it smells to me like far away. It smells like the unknown. And it brings a lot of darkness and it blackens really our Gaillac wood.
Yeah.
Behind it, I wanted to have a malt feeling. I've used this almost like I wouldn't say whiskey, but like a malty feeling. And I've used some cabreva, which is a wood that comes from Brazil. Cabreva. It's spelled C-A-B-R-E-U-V-A, cabreva. And it's from Brazil. And it's funny because when we speak about it, not many people know it. Though when you learn perfumery, it's one of the classic of the perfumers, cabreva. And so the result is a woody, ambery, dark wood. To me, it's beautiful on men or women. It's a bit like a very black, leathery, woody note that you can wear with jeans or with t-shirt. It's easygoing and it's elegant, I feel.
Yeah, I think it's also one of the unique ones from this, you know. So, and now I'm realizing when I'm smelling it, I think I like it more than the incense, the coffee one. It's always like this, you know. You have sometimes some mood, and you know, I think it's the first time I'm spraying it on the paper. Yeah, it's the small one.
No,
it's crazy. It's really I can't even explain it. It's dark wood is the best way of explaining it. But there is a freshness behind it. I don't know. There is a
yes, you're right. But this malty feeling, there's a touch of juniper, in it.
Yeah, there's minty, not mintiness, but it's a watery freshness behind that wood.
But you know, when you smell patchouli, there's a freshness about patchouli. There's something vibrant about it.
Yeah. Hey, I have to spend more time with this one. I think it's something that really is growing every time I smell it. So
you know, actually, Howard, I was looking at what you were showing. You were showing the little bottles.
Yeah.
You know, Matière Première really wants to show the reality of the work of a perfumer, and our bottles are inspired from the bottles that every perfumer has when he works on his desk. And those little bottles are the ones that I do my creation for. So we've just made a larger version of it. And our fragrances are available at 100 ml, but also in smaller size, because we felt that it was cool to make qualitative fragrances accessible. And I remember when I were at home at my place, when I have friends coming and visiting me, on one shelf I had a few fragrances that are created that are on the market, you know, that I'm very proud of, and I found the bottle absolutely beautiful. And on the other hand of the room, I have another shelf with my little bottles,
only
my development bottles. And whenever my friends were coming at home, they were running to those. And they were in fact so intrigued and smelling them. So we thought it was actually cool to exploit that.
Absolutely. No, this is really cool. And what I like about them is it's 6 ml and they last long. So you can have it. You can do all the testings as you want. You don't have to commit to a big bottle. You can definitely, you know, only also with the discovery kit, you have enough fragrance to make your choice. Let's call it.
Yeah.
Right. And
you get 100 sprays on between 95 and 100 sprays on the 6 ml.
Really?
Yes. And the gestures that you actually do, you mean unscrewing the top, the cap, and screwing a pump, is what perfumers do when we work. From our lab, we get given those little bottles. We select on the blotter maybe one or two best one. Then we unscrew them, we put a pump, and we spray them on skin to see which one is the nicest.
Cute. Yeah, I didn't know that because I always saw those testing bottles that you had while you create stuff. So I was like, maybe you use the same bottles, but I didn't know that it's a classic one. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Another fragrance that I want to talk about, which is I found very unique, is the Cedra, Cologne Cedra.
Cologne Cedra.
Is beautiful citrus. It's really, yes. You call it trail of citrus, right? So I'm really fascinated by it. Let's talk about this a little bit.
So one of the tasks of Matière Première is to sublimate the natural. And sometimes the natural can be beautiful, but it has weakness. In this case, when you smell a beautiful citrus, it's beautiful, but it doesn't last long.
Yeah.
So my idea the creative idea was to create a citrus note that lasts for 6 or 7 hours.
Yeah.
The main ingredient that I've used is citron oil. It comes from Italy. Citron is in French cedra, which is a kind of citrus note. And I've used this one because it really preserves the quality of the smell you have when you scratch a peel of citrus.
It is a peel.
In your hands.
For me, it's really a green peel when you scratch it or when you have a small parts of it. That's what I.
So I really wanted to preserve this identity, and I wanted to do what perfumers do: give the illusion. So I wanted to give the illusion that the citrus would last for 6 hours, even though the raw material itself disappears after 1.
Crazy.
So I've combined it with a couple of spices like pink pepper and black pepper because they are fresh spices. I've combined those spices with the citron that infuses in the spice. Then in the back, I've played with the bergamot again, but I've played with the bergamot as a floral note, not as a citrus note. And finally, in the back, a touch of mate from Paraguay, which gives a tea note and lasts forever. So, together with it, you give the illusion that the citrus lasts for 6 hours, but in fact, the construction is very subtle, and you don't see that, in fact, the citrus is then replaced by spices and spices by mate.
Yeah, and I think paper doesn't do justice. There are 2-3 fragrances that I have to put it on my skin because right now the citrus is so strong that you don't smell anything else. It's really crazy.
It's funny what you say, but because to me a fragrance is like a dress, and when I speak to a couple of couturiers, they say the same thing. You can have a beautiful thing, but until it's wear, the magic doesn't operate. It needs to be worn, and sometimes you will see beautiful things but don't fit you. Sometimes I can see a beautiful fragrance and I feel I would love to have it on me, but in fact when I do, it's not that great. And so it's always a combination of the perfect perfume is only the perfect perfume if it matches a good person.
Yeah, absolutely. We have 6 minutes earlier. I would love to talk real quick about Santal Austral and then let you go. Time passed by so quickly, but let's talk about Santal Austral, another beautiful, unique one, also like Bois d'Ebene.
Thank you, Raoul. Well, Santal Austral is probably the opposite exercise as Cologne Cedra.
Yeah.
I wanted to create a white, sensual wood.
Completely.
Sandalwood oil is beautiful, lasts forever, but it doesn't smell much right at the beginning. So I've selected a sandalwood oil coming from Australia. It's actually made by local populations in a fair trade philosophy. And it has it's also made with woods that are planted. So meaning that you don't cut old sandalwoods.
Okay.
It's planted woods that are being distillated. Okay. And the idea behind Santal Austral was to amplify the whiteness of the sandalwood. I played with a touch of Enquiries from Italy, an almond note also because an almond smells white. And all together, those 2 ingredients give the top note of our sandalwood. Then we have an overdose of sandalwood oil, and in the back, touches of 2 ingredients, tonka bean, which is a bean, but so a bean is a bit like an almond, so it's very coherent with the top, and a touch of benzoin, which is a sap that gives an addiction and comfort to the fragrance. And the idea is to create a very long-lasting, white, sensual wood.
Yeah.
Sandalwood.
Yeah. I haven't smelled, I have to be honest, many sandalwood fragrances. And this, I think, gives me a very good, it paints a very good picture on how a sandalwood fragrance. I grew up with sandalwood in India. You know, you use it all the time in spiritual aspects and everything. But in fragrances, I have to be honest, I'm new to them. But this really gives a very beautiful representation of sandalwood.
You know, there are beautiful fragrances that were created with sandalwood. Sometimes pretty complex. So it was not just sandalwood. It was also combined quite often with rose, with other notes. In this case, this is a very simple wood worked with, you know, as much close to the natural as we can be.
Beautiful. Aurelien, I would love to have you another hour talk more about fragrances. Perhaps we'll have to organize another one. But first of all, thank you very much for giving us an overview of the fragrances. What I can tell everyone watching is there is something for everyone. I mean, I like all of them, but I'm pretty sure you will find something that you would love, some note that you like. I'm pretty sure. I really highly appreciate you coming in here. And I really recommend that you at least give them a try, take the sample kit. And before we go, Aurelien, what is next for the brand? Please tell us what are you working on and what's coming next?
Well, we have a few projects. We have one, we're planting some tuberose for the coming years. So we're going to have our own tuberose plants. And we're also working on a oud, but a different oud.
Okay.
And, you know, again, it's always the same philosophy, preserving the beauty of the natural, but creating something unique. That's what we're trying to do.
Is it coming next year?
It will be coming next year. We are working with an ethic wood, worked with a beautiful quality. And so, you know, it's not finished yet, but it's
beautiful. There was
way.
Someone told maybe you should do also something with vetiver. I could imagine that you spread some real magic with vetiver. Is one note that I've been really fascinated with. But yeah, tuberose oud sounds great. I mean, another two notes that I'm pretty sure if it will be the same magic that you spread here, is gonna spread.
You know, it's frustrating because I understand what you say, and there's so many raw materials that I love, and there are so many that I would love to do. Whether it's vetiver, I saw people writing galbanum. There's plenty of great things because every ingredient has a beautiful facet.
True.
So our task is to give this facet to people.
Lovely, Aurelien. Such a pleasure. Thank you for spending time. I hope we could do it again, talk about the next tuberose and oud next year. But I wish you best of luck. You have my complete support when it comes to the fragrances. And like I said, everyone watching, please do me a favor, try the fragrances and tell me what your favorite is. Thank you very much, Aurelien.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing this moment with me.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'll let you go.
Bye.
Bye.